Just a heads up real quick, this video is going to contain massive spoilers for all of the recently released MCU content. So Ant-Man the Wasp Quantumania, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and A Secret Invasion. If you haven't seen those, go watch them. Or if you don't care about spoilers, keep watching. Or if you do care about spoilers, but you don't want to watch those, don't complain about being spoiled. Or do, I don't know, I can't control you. Before I actually begin with the video, I just want to say that without the labor of writers and actors, the Marvel Cinematic Universe wouldn't exist, and by extension, this video. So if you want to learn more about the current strikes going on, I'll leave a link in the description below. So in the time since the first MCU Iceberg, 16 projects in the MCU have been released. 9 films, 6 shows, and 2 specials. So I think it's about time for a part 2. Before I continue, I just want to ask you guys to like the video and comment below if you like the video. You know, what's your favorite entry and all that. Also, if I goofed up and made a mistake, let me know in the comments. Also, subscribe to the channel if you want to see some more Iceberg videos about all this nerdy fandom stuff. I've got icebergs on not just Marvel and DC stuff, but Star Wars, Godzilla, Halo, Call of Duty, Evangelion, Transformers, Gears of War, etc. And I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. I got more superhero icebergs on the way, like Wonder Woman, Daredevil, the X-Men, the DCEU, etc. Oh, and one last thing. I've covered some MCU topics in both my Spider-Man icebergs and my Iron Man iceberg. So I won't be talking about these topics in the video. If you want to see me talk about them, go watch those videos. And finally, I just want to shout out this one small channel, A Bit of Everything. Dude might be the single biggest MCU fan in the world. He goes crazy in depth with all of his videos on the franchise, so check him out. He is criminally underrated. Here are some of my favorite videos from him. So, with all that being said, let's begin. Spider-Man No Way Home, the more fun stuff version. So in September of 2022, Sony and Marvel released an extended cut of Spider-Man No Way Home, called the More Fun Stuff version. This special edition of the film was basically just the theatrical cut, but with all of the completed deleted scenes added back into the film. It featured a variety of scenes, like Tom Holland's brother's cameo that was cut, a new scene with Matt Murdock, a scene where Betty Brant actually does something in the film, an entirely new post-credits scene, and various new and extended scenes featuring Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Man. They even released a poster for this version, and it's the definition of cluttered. While this film is looked at as the definitive version of the film, and by extension the canon version of the film, it did have some controversy surrounding it. Because, unlike every other Marvel or Spider-Man film, No Way Home's Blu-ray release featured no deleted scenes at all. And it's very obvious why this was the case. They were saving the deleted scenes for the extended cut. Nick Fury's grave. At the end of Captain America the Winter Soldier, Nick Fury's grave has the Bible verse, "The path of the righteous man," Ezekiel 25:17, written on it. This is the same Bible verse said by Jules Winfield in Pulp Fiction. This wouldn't be that notable if it wasn't for the fact that both Nick Fury and Jules Winfield are played by Sam Jackson. Don Cheadle was nominated for an Emmy for his role in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That's it. That's the entry. Don Cheadle made a cameo appearance as Rhodey, although it may have been Skrull Rhodey, we'll get to that, in the first episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. He had 98 seconds of screen time, had 6 lines, and was nominated for an award. Don Cheadle himself found this pretty funny and didn't understand why he was nominated. Deleted scenes. So I went over a bunch of deleted scenes in the first MCU Iceberg. However, I only talked about scenes from Iron Man 1 to Black Widow, and I didn't talk about the deleted scenes from the Disney Plus shows. So here's 3 deleted scenes from every MCU movie and show from WandaVision to Secret Invasion, minus No Way Home and Black Widow, because I've already talked about deleted scenes from those movies in other videos. In WandaVision, there was a scene in which Monica, Darcy, Ralph Boner, and Wanda's kids attempting to steal the Darkhold from Agatha's basement that was scrapped. Agatha's rabbit would transform into a demon and battle them. An entire subplot was cut from the show, involving Monica in therapy dealing with her mother's death. And finally, there was a scene in which Wanda snaps at the members of S.A.B.E.R for acting like Tony Stark was the only Avenger who died fighting Thanos. In Falcon and the Winter Soldier, both Captain America and Yelena were supposed to cameo in the show. Yelena's cameo was scrapped because Marvel wanted to save her introduction for Black Widow. As for Captain America, his cameo was scrapped because it was far too soon to reintroduce the character. There was also supposed to be a fight scene in Puerto Rico, where Battlestar would be shown using electric gloves. And finally, Anthony Mackie suggested that Sam take a jab at Donald Trump's Make America Great Again slogan during his speech at the end of the show. But this was rejected, probably because Trump was never president in the MCU. Oh wait, never mind, he was. In Loki Season 1, in the opening episode, there would be a scene with Loki in Stark Tower saying, "Glorious." This was cut fairly late into development, as it's shown in several trailers. Mobius would show Loki footage of a young Loki turning Thor into a frog, only for Frog Thor to beat up Loki. And finally, there was supposed to be a scene in which Loki goes on a time-traveling adventure via montage. He would visit various time periods, have some pretty explicit meetups with men, women, and aliens, collect all the Infinity Stones, and take the throne of Asgard. The throne scene was actually shown in several trailers. In Shang-Chi, Razor Fist was originally going to die at the hands of a Soul Eater, after encouraging Katie during the final battle. There was originally going to be a scene in which, in a flashback, the Mandarin would have been given a progress report about how Raza and the Ten Rings are destabilizing Afghanistan. This was an obvious reference to Iron Man 1. And finally, there was a scene in which Trevor and Katie bond while chilling out in the car. In Eternals, Gilgamesh and Kingo bond over films while traveling through the Amazon rainforest. There was also a scene in which Sprite and Makari reminisce over humankind while in the ruins of Babylon. And finally, a mid-credits scene involving Thena, Makari, and Eros talking to Arshium was cut. In Hawkeye, a flashback scene set in 1984 about Clint and his mom going to a fair was cut. Clint would steal a watch and then win a rigged shooting gallery game. And his mom is just like, "It's okay to do bad things to bad people." She would then try to have Clint help her rob a gas station. Clint would refuse to shoot the gas station guy, and his mom would be arrested. There was also a scene in which Clint and Kate are shopping for arrows at a sports store that was cut. Clint would be recognized as Hawkeye by the guy working there. And finally, Echo would dress up in her iconic comic outfit for the final episode. However, this was scrapped in order to save the costume for her own show. In Moon Knight, Dane Whitman, aka Black Knight, was supposed to cameo in either the first or second episode of the show. However, he was written out of the show pretty early on because Jeremy Slater, the showrunner and creator of the show, felt he deserved more than just a cameo. But if he appeared too much, he would take the focus away from Moon Knight. The final confrontation of the show was originally supposed to be Mark and Steven confronting an apparition of their mother, who would be a stand-in for Amit. And finally, a small reference to Gore the God Butcher was cut from the show. It was cut because Marvel execs felt it would be unnecessary. In Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, main universe Mordo was going to die at the very beginning of the film while trying to assassinate Wanda. Wanda would not only kill him, but straight up decapitate him. This scene was cut so late into development that there's still several posters for the film that still reference this scene. Christine's husband, Charlie, was going to have more screen time, including one scene where Michael Waldron would play his best man. Waldron was the head writer for Loki Season 1 and Doctor Strange 2. And finally, Pizza Papa would have actually had some kind of plot relevance, where he would accuse Doctor Strange of being an imposter of that universe's Strange. In Thor Love and Thunder, a scene was cut in which Star-Lord and Mantis try to convince Thor to help them, only for Thor to casually chat with them during the big battle. I wish this scene was in the movie, because it would mean that Mantis would have more than one line. The Grandmaster and Eitri were both planned to appear in the film. Both Jeff Goldblum and Peter Dinklage filmed their scenes, but both ended up being scrapped for unknown reasons. Lena Headey also filmed scenes for the movie, but all of her scenes were scrapped as well, and it's not publicly known who she was playing. And finally, Sidorak and Jesus were supposed to appear in the God City. In Ms. Marvel, there was originally supposed to be an Easter egg referencing the Inhumans dog, Lockjaw. There was also an alternate version of Kamala returning home from Avengers Con that was filmed, where her brother is the first to find her. And finally, there would be a scene revealing that Kamala Khan only knows so much about the Battle of Earth because there was a ton of live streamers and drones recording the battle. This was rejected by Kevin Feige. In She-Hulk, originally at the end of the first episode, She-Hulk would defeat Titania by punching her in the crotch. This was actually filmed, but scrapped. Abomination's trial was originally going to be a season-long event with multiple courtroom scenes. And finally, the show was supposed to end with a final battle between She-Hulk and Hulk King. However, Kevin Feige didn't really like this, and suggested they try something different. In Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, a scene in which Everett Ross infiltrates the NSA was cut. A scene in which Okoye has a standoff with Ayo, and the rest of the Dora Milaje was cut. This scene was actually shown in the film's teaser trailer. And finally, Wakabe was meant to return in the film, but in a small role. But he had to be cut from the film because his actor had some scheduling issues with this film and Nope. In Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, originally, Hank was going to be wearing the original Ant-Man suit during the final battle against Kang. And Kang would realize that Hank was the original Ant-Man. This was scrapped because it wouldn't make sense as to why Hank would have the original suit with him. While flying through the probability storm, Hope would see a variant of herself with a child played by a kid named Lucas Grant. This scene was cut because it apparently made the overall scene feel disjointed. And finally, Janet was actually going to have more powers. She was going to use her quantum healing abilities that she had in Ant-Man 2 throughout the film, and because she healed Ghost, she would have the ability to phase through objects. She would use these powers to fight Kang during the final battle. In Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, an alternate version of the dining room scene on Counter-Earth was filmed, in which Peter apologizes for his friend Drax being an idiot, and then Drax complains that he's hungry. There was also a scene in which Adam Warlock explains to Aisha what he plans on doing to the Guardians of the Galaxy once he finds them. There was a scene in which High Evolutionary is locked up by rockets in nowhere, while Kraglin recruits Adam Warlock into the Guardians. And finally, for Secret Invasion, the only thing, as of right now, that we know was cut was a scene involving a character played by Carmen Eyogo. She was planned to be in the show, but for whatever reason, her role was removed. T'Challa Star-Lord Show. It was revealed shortly after the release of What If's first season that there were plans for a spin-off series focused on T'Challa Star-Lord, with Chadwick Boseman returning to voice the character. However, due to the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman, the show was cancelled. Well, let me rephrase that. It's technically not been cancelled, it's in limbo. However, due to Disney and Marvel not wanting to recast T'Challa, I can't see this show ever making a return, so it's basically cancelled. Before it was basically cancelled, the show was just in the discussion stages. So early that according to What If's director Brian Andrews, Chadwick Boseman may have not have been aware of the spinoff. Bushman. So Bushman was originally going to be the main antagonist of Moon Knight. After all, he's one of Moon Knight's most famous villains in the comics. However, he was cut from the show and replaced with Arthur Harrow for multiple reasons. These reasons being that Bushman's motivations and character arc was too similar to Killmonger from Black Panther. Bushman would also annihilate Steven in a fight, but would be easily defeatable by Mark. And finally, Bushman has been controversial over the years, due to him apparently being stereotypical. These reasons all come from Jeremy Slater, the show's creator. Despite being removed from the show, Bushman still does exist in the MCU, as he's briefly mentioned by name in Episode 5 of Moon Knight. Luckily for Bushman fans, Jeremy Slater has confirmed that it's still possible for Bushman to show up in a future Moon Knight project. Avengers Assembled. Strangely, The only phase in the entire MCU that has a name is Phase 1. Sure, there's the Infinity Saga and the Multiverse Saga, but Phases 2 through 5 all don't have names. Phase 1 is often referred to as Avengers Assembled, except it's really only referred to that in the marketing, with the name directly coming from the Phase 1 Avengers Assembled Blu-ray box set. Runaways gets snapped. In May 2023, Runaways was removed from both Hulu and Disney Plus as part of a cost-cutting measure. Thankfully, you can still purchase the show on Amazon Instant Video, Google Play, and Vudu. But you know what's wild? Inhumans is still on Disney Plus. I mean, as it should be. I think everything Marvel-related should be on Disney Plus, regardless of quality, but it's wild to me that they didn't remove Inhumans, and instead chose to remove the show with a fan base, 3 seasons, and 2 different awards. Universe montage. In Multiverse of Madness, Strange and America travel through various realities in a little montage, and each of these realities has a name. There's Pipe World, which is a world that seems to be controlled by Stark Industries, The Savage Land, which is based on the Savage Lands for the comics, Post-Apocalyptic World, which is apparently an entire universe that's been destroyed, Cube World, which is a world where everything is made up of the little tiny cubes, Paint World, which is a world in which everyone is made of paint, seems like a hellish existence, Hydra World, which is a world in which Hydra was successful and took it over, also seems like a hellish existence, the Living Tribunal Statue World, which is just a world where there's a bunch of statues of the Living Tribunal, Underwater World, which is a world that's just a giant ocean, Honeycomb World, which is a universe ruled by colonies of giant bees, Onslaught Canyon World, which is just an Earth made up of exclusively canyons, Comic Book World, which is a universe where everyone looks like they're living inside of a comic book, and finally, Alternate New York. It's just like New York, except it's different, I guess. Earth 616 confusion. So for a long time, the MCU was listed in the Grand Marvel Multiverse as Earth 199999. It's even referred to as that in Across the Spider-Verse. However, it's since been confirmed in Multiverse of Madness that the main Marvel universe in the MCU is called Earth 616, the same name as the main Marvel Comics timeline. So how does that work? Well, I guess that means the MCU, and by extension, the Fox X-Men, Daredevil, and Fantastic Four films, the Raimi trilogy, the TASM films, Sony's Spider-Man universe without Spider-Man, and the Spider-Verse films all take place in a multiverse that's not connected to the comics multiverse. But that brings in a lot of questions. Like we see Insomniac's Spider-Man in Across the Spider-Verse, but he's also in the comic event Spider-Geddon. So is the Insomniac Spider-Man, and by extension Insomniac Wolverine, in some weird pocket universe that's canon to both of these multiverses? I don't know, it's really weird, and I think it's best if we don't actually think about it. Last thing I'll mention here is that Iman Vellani, Kamala Khan's actress, actually got annoyed with the name change, and even confronted Kevin Feige about it. Armor Wars miniseries. On December 10th, 2020, it was revealed that a 6-episode miniseries inspired by the Armor Wars comic event and starring Don Cheadle as War Machine was in development. Few months later, it was confirmed by Don Cheadle that the show would begin production in mid-2021. That did not happen. Then, in February 2022, it was reported that the show would finally begin production in October or November of 2022. Then, on September 10th, 2022, it was revealed that production would actually begin sometime in 2023. But then, only 2 weeks later, on September 29th, 2022, it was confirmed that the Armor Wars miniseries was cancelled, and would be redeveloped into a film. All we know about the original series was that Ironheart was going to appear in the show in some capacity. And, obviously, Tony Stark's death would have a huge role in the story. Fake Multiverse of Madness leaks. Before Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was released, people went crazy online, posting leaks and rumors about the film. And a lot of these so-called leaks and rumors were completely wrong. Probably the most infamous fake leak was that the film would have a Battle of Earth-like sequence where Strange would recruit characters from the Fox X-Men and Fantastic Four films, Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider, Eric Bana's Hulk, Ben Affleck's Daredevil, Edward Norton's Hulk, Thomas Jane's Punisher, but in a War Machine armor, the entire cast of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the entire cast of Runaways, Cloak and Dagger, a variant of Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, the Raimi trilogy Spider-Man, and a bunch of other heroes in order to battle a bunch of demons being led by Wanda. Also, Loki, Sylvie, and Mobius from Loki would appear, watching the multiverse collapse from the TVA. AKA Jessica Jones. In July 2022, the name of the show Jessica Jones was changed on Disney Plus to AKA Jessica Jones. This is weird because no other pre-Disney Plus MCU show got their name changed when they were added to Disney Plus. So why did they change the name? Well, it's never been confirmed, though it can be speculated that Disney or Marvel liked the original title better. Because yes, Jessica Jones wasn't the original title of the show, aka Jessica Jones was. This was the title the show was pitched with for ABC, but during production, it was decided to simplify the title to just Jessica Jones, even though the show's episode titles all kept the AKA part. But the weirdest part about this whole thing is that they didn't actually change Jessica Jones' title. Yeah, I kind of exaggerated that. Instead, they changed the show's title card in the first episode. Every other episode's title card just said Jessica Jones. It was just the first episode that now read AKA Jessica Jones. And for some reason, shortly after they did this, they changed it back. War Machine in Avengers 1. When the Avengers was released in 2012, a lot of people began asking the question, why didn't War Machine help out during the final battle? And honestly, that's a pretty valid question. Like, where was he? He would have been a big help during the fight. Well, it turns out in universe, Rhodey was called to help out during the Battle of New York, but the battle was over with by the time he got there. As for a real-life explanation as to why Rhodey, and by extension Don Cheadle, wasn't in the Avengers, there's actually never been a reason given. I think the reason why he wasn't included in the film was because Nick Fury didn't initially want to recruit him into the Avengers, because he was still a member of the US Air Force at the time. But like, he wasn't part of the Avengers during the Battle of Sokovia, and he still showed up there, so I don't really get why Avengers 1 couldn't have him just show up during the final battle, like he did during Age of Ultron. The original Ant-Man 3 ending. Originally, the ending of Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania was going to be a lot different than what we ended up getting. The original ending of the film had both Scott and Hope trapped in the quantum realm, while Hank, Janet, and Cassie all escaped. This ending was changed completely, only a few months before the film's release, with Scott and Hope now escaping the quantum realm. The reason why the ending was changed was because the film's writer, Jeff Loveness, felt they should give Scott a happy ending to end the trilogy. Side note, this part hasn't been confirmed, but according to various leakers and insiders, one of the after-credits scenes to the film was supposed to be Cassie discovering the Young Avengers initiative. Again, this hasn't been confirmed to be real, but if it is, well, then it got scrapped for unknown reasons. Nightmare. So I talked about Scott Derrickson's Doctor Strange 2 in the first MCU Iceberg. However, I didn't talk a ton about it, because at the time, all we knew about it was that Nightmare was going to be the main villain. In the years since that video, we now know a ton more about this cancelled film. Nightmare would be the main villain of the film, and the movie would be very dark and have a heavy horror vibe to it. We also know that Strange's sister, Donna Strange, and her death were going to be massive parts of the film's plot. Concept art of Scott Derrickson's Doctor Strange 2 was leaked, in which we see Strange visiting the lake house where his sister drowned. There, he'd face off against Nightmare, who'd be riding on a horse. Also, this lake house would be built in a forest called Wendigo Forest. We also know that Wanda would have been working alongside Strange for most of the film. However, by the third act, Wanda would have been corrupted by the Darkhold. As for Nightmare, concept art for him shows that he was going to be heavily inspired by mythology. That's not to say the entire film would have been doom and gloom, though. There was also supposed to be a variant of Strange called Marvelous Melvin, who would have been a street magician with no magic. Avengers Quantum Encounter. Quantum Encounter is a 13-minute short film that can only be watched on the Disney cruise ship Wish, although you can find recordings of it on YouTube. It takes place in an alternate MCU and tells the story of how Captain Marvel, Sam Wilson Captain America, Ant-Man, Wasp, and Ms. Marvel team up to take on the newly revived Ultron, who's trying to steal Scott Lang's quantum core. While it's not canon to the main MCU, this short film is extremely notable for being the first time several characters have interacted, notably Sam Wilson and Kamala Khan. Also, outside of Ultron, every character in the film is played by the actor who plays them in the MCU. After the film, people dressed up like Ant-Man and the Wasp walk out into the crowd and begin interacting with fans. Also, in the film, Scott Lang acknowledges the Ant-Man Thanos butt meme and tries to give an explanation as to why he didn't expand inside of Thanos, but Wasp cuts him off. Disney Plus edits. So like with the Jessica Jones title change, other Marvel shows have gotten some changes. However, unlike Jessica Jones, they usually stay changed. Here's some of the more notable changes. In Ms. Marvel, they changed the Statue of Liberty in Episode 6 to its bronze coloring in No Way Home. In WandaVision, in the after credits scene, not only did they go in and add a bunch of trees to the scene, but they also added in this weird floating figure that you can barely see. In Hawkeye Episode 1, Marvel went back and changed Stark Tower and Kate Bishop's flashback to the Battle of New York to fix a continuity error. And finally, we have the most famous change, or should I say infamous change. Months after the release of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Marvel censored 2 different scenes. They removed the blood from the scene in which Wilfred Nagel gets killed, and made the pole that gets impaled into this one dude bounce off of him. This was an extremely controversial change. Luckily, it didn't last very long, and both changes were removed. Apparently, this wasn't an intentional change. Instead, it was a mistake. Though I have no idea how a mistake like that gets made. Hellstrom? Released on October 16th, 2020, Hellstrom is a weird show, because it's both canon and non-canon to the MCU, and not in a multiverse way. Although I guess it actually is. The show is about Damien and Anna Hellstrom doing some supernatural horror stuff in the Marvel Universe. It was greenlit alongside the Ghost Rider Hulu series as the beginning of the Adventures into S.A.B.E.R sub-series. Basically, MCU shows that focused on horror or supernatural elements, and would air exclusively on Hulu, much like how Netflix had the Defenders sub-series. However, the Ghost Rider show was eventually cancelled due to creative differences, and so, Hellstrom was to be the beginning of the sub-series. Up until its release, it was said that Hellstrom would be canon to the MCU. However, when the show released, not only was the Marvel logo taken off the project as a way of distancing itself from the MCU, but it was officially confirmed by the show's creator that the show was not canon to the MCU, and it was its own thing. This was very clearly a last-second decision, most likely influenced by Marvel TV folding, as various references to the MCU can be found in Hellstrom. When did Rhodey become a Skrull? So after years of theories, it's finally been confirmed that Rhodey was a Skrull. Now the question is, for how long? Well, there's 3 theories. The first is that he became a Skrull right after Iron Man 1. Not much evidence for that, outside of it being a fun explanation for the actor change between films, in universe. but it doesn't really work. The two other theories are far more popular: during Civil War or after Endgame. And there's evidence for both sides. As for the Civil War side, Rhodey is seen wearing the exact same hospital gown he was wearing in Civil War. Secret Invasion's showrunner has also said that his legs still being paralyzed and the hospital gown point towards the Civil War theory being true. As for the Endgame evidence, Rhodey almost drowns in Endgame. If he was a Skrull at the time, they must have been the most dedicated actor of all time, because you would think that they would just swim until somebody found them. Next is the hospital gown. Yeah, it looks like the same Civil War hospital gown, but that doesn't really mean much. He very well could have just been getting his legs checked out after Endgame when he got switched. Also, it's been mentioned that Gravik and a bunch of other Skrulls retrieved blood from the Avengers after the Battle of Endgame, so like they were still working for Nick Fury around that time. He hadn't become radicalized yet. So why would Gravik have a Skrull take over Rhodey while he was still working for Fury? Finally, Secret Invasion's showrunner has also refused to give an actual answer to this question. Yeah, he said some pieces of evidence point to Civil War, but he didn't confirm the theory. So what's the actual answer? Honestly, I think they're being vague on purpose to see how people react to these theories. And we'll find out the answer in Armor Wars. Lame answer, I know, but I think that's what's going on. Personally, I prefer him being a Skrull after Endgame.
We'll be right back to Marvel's Avengers: Ultron Revolution on Disney XD.
Okay, who are you?
The milkman?
Do you have a sidekick?
No.
A nemesis?
A what?
A bad guy?
I'm a people person.
Have you been fighting crime long?
I don't fight crime.
What do you fight?
Weak bones. A never-ending supply of milk. And chocolate milk.
Want strong bones? The calcium in milk helps make your bones strong.
And now back to Marvel's Avengers: Ultron Revolution on Disney XD.
Wonder Man in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. In Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Wonder Man was going to make a cameo. He would have been portrayed by Nathan Fillion, but not in person. Instead, posters featuring Wonder Man would appear. These posters would have all been parodies of real-life film posters. This scene was cut from the film because it apparently would have slowed the film down a bit. It's probably a good thing that this scene was scrapped though, because if it was kept, there would have been some continuity errors with the upcoming Wonder Man show. Bushwhacker. Concept artist Wesley Burt revealed on his Instagram in November 2022 that the Daredevil and Punisher villain, Bushwhacker, was originally going to show up in one of the first few episodes of She-Hulk. The joke with him was that whenever he wanted to fight someone, he would have to slowly and awkwardly put on his clunky arm cannons. As to why he was cut from the show, no reason was given, though I can only assume it was a time thing or a budget thing. Kingo in Moon Knight. Jeremy Slater has stated that there were actually plans for an episode of Moon Knight to begin with a flashback to ancient Egypt. Here, we'd be introduced to another avatar of Khonshu, the Moon Knight of ancient Egypt. And we'd also see this ancient Moon Knight working alongside a few of the Eternals, including Kingo. So why was this scene scrapped? Well, because it would be insanely expensive to bring in not just Kingo's actor, but at least 3 more of the actors who portrayed the Eternals. Original casting. So in the first MCU Iceberg, I went over a couple of actors who almost were in the MCU. However, in my opinion, I didn't really list enough of them. So here's a huge list of actors who were considered or auditioned for characters in the MCU. For Black Panther, there was Chad Coleman, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Noel Clarke, John Boyega, and Anthony Mackie. For US Agent, there was Sam Claflin. For Nebula, there was Gal Gadot. For Kilgrave, there was Jim Carrey. For Hank Pym, there was Steve Buscemi, Gary Oldman, Sean Bean, and Pierce Brosnan. For Daredevil, there was Michael C. Hall, Damian Lewis, and Scott Adkins. For Shuri, there was Amandla Stenberg and Dominic Thorne. For Valkyrie, there was Lupita Nyong'o. For Luke Cage, there was Lance Gross. For Scott Lang, there was Simon Pegg, Adrian Brody, and Ian McGregor. For Sprite, there was Millie Bobby Brown. For Red Guardian, there was Alec Baldwin and Sebastian Koch. For Wasp, there was Rashida Jones, Emma Stone, and Bryce Dallas Howard. For the Punisher, there was Louis Hertham and James Frain. For Shang-Chi, there was Ross Butler, Louis Tan, Stephen Yeun, Mike Moe, and Ludi Lin. For She-Hulk, there was Allison Brie, Jillian Jacobs, Betty Gilpin, and Zoe Chow. For Ego, there was Matthew McConaughey, Mel Gibson, Liam Neeson, Alec Baldwin, Ron Perlman, Gary Oldman, Bruce Willis, Stephen Lang, Robert De Niro, and Christopher Plummer. For Jessica Jones, there was Teresa Palmer, Marin Ireland, Jessica DeGao, and Alexandria Daddario. For Cersei, there was Sofia Boutella, Tatiana Maslany, and Marie Avgeropoulos. For Yelena, there was Emma Watson, Saoirse Ronan, and Dar Zubatsky. For Kate Bishop, there was Catherine Newton, Olivia Cook, and Taissa Farminga. For Maria Hill, there was Jessica Lucas, Mary Elizabeth Winston, and Morena Baccarin. For Druig, there was Keanu Reeves, Luke Evans, Rami Malek, and Ian McShane. For Iron Fist, there was Luke Bracey and Ryan Phillippe. For Ajax, there was Naomi Scott, Gina Rodriguez, Ana de Armas, and Isa Gonzalez. For Adam Warlock, there was George McKay and Roger Jean Page. And finally, for Icarus, there was Alexander Skarsgård, Sam Heughan, Charlie Hunnam, and Armie Hammer. Scrapped Illuminati members. The Illuminati, featured in Multiverse of Madness, had its roster changed significantly during production, with characters being added and removed multiple times. Here's a list of all the scrapped Illuminati members that we know about. First, there's Baldur the Brave, who would have been played by Daniel Craig. He was very nearly in the film and was cut very late in production. He was removed from the film because Daniel Craig backed out of the film due to concerns about filming during COVID. Next, there's Magneto. This is a weird one because there's many different reports saying that scenes involving Magneto were filmed. However, according to producer Michael Waldron, Magneto was briefly considered for the Illuminati, but was not seriously considered because it would have been too much to explain and it would have detracted from the film. Insiders and leakers have said that Michael Fassbender would have reprised the role again, but this hasn't been confirmed, so take it with a grain of salt. Next, there's Wasp. It's unknown why she was scrapped, and it's unknown if this was supposed to be Janet or Hope. But what we do know is that Wanda would have squished her in her hands. Next, there's Namor. He was going to be in the Illuminati, however, Ryan Coogler went to Marvel and requested that nobody else use Namor before his appearance in Wakanda Forever, so they scrapped him. Then there's Ghost Rider. This one isn't entirely confirmed and is only mentioned by leakers and insiders. According to them, Ghost Rider was supposed to be a member of the Illuminati and he had his scenes filmed. However, it's unknown which Ghost Rider this was supposed to be. And again, it's not confirmed, so grain of salt. Then there's Iron Man. This is a really weird one, because originally, an Iron Man variant wasn't supposed to ever be an Illuminati member. However, after seeing all of the rumors online about Tom Cruise apparently playing a Tony Stark variant in the film, Michael Waldron went up to Kevin Feige and tried to pitch the idea to him. Feige responded, saying that the idea was impossible, because while they were filming Doctor Strange 2, Tom Cruise was busy filming Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1 and 2. And finally, there's Ironmonger. No, really. Concept art for the film shows that in an earlier version of the film, a variant of Ironmonger was going to be part of the Illuminati. Nebula actually ripped off Bucky's arm, So remember that joke in Infinity War where Rocket said he wanted Bucky's arm, and Bucky was just kind of confused why a raccoon with a gun wanted his cybernetic arm? Well, Rocket would eventually get Bucky's arm in the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, as a gift from Nebula. But that now leaves the question, how did Nebula get Bucky's arm? While most just assumed that Bucky gave it to her for some reason after Endgame, it was actually confirmed by James Gunn that Nebula traveled to Earth in December of 2025, tracked down Bucky, beat him up, and ripped off his arm so she could give it to Rocket. I wonder if Thunderbolts will acknowledge this. Megan Thee Stallion has superpowers. So this is a bit of a joke entry. When the She-Hulk episode, The People vs. Emil Blonsky, aired, fans of the show began half-jokingly theorizing that Megan Thee Stallion in the MCU actually has superpowers. This was theorized because many believed that She-Hulk only took on cases for metahumans and superheroes. But that's not true. She-Hulk's job is taking on cases involving metahumans and superheroes. In the show, Megan Thee Stallion hired She-Hulk to file a cease and desist against a light elf for impersonating her. So yeah, that's how she was able to take on the case. It involved a dude with powers. Alan Taylor's Thor: The Dark World. So Thor: The Dark World is often looked at as one of the weakest MCU films. It's definitely my least favorite of the Thor films. And it's not just fans who feel this way, but also the director of the film, Alan Taylor. In interviews, Alan Taylor has said that Marvel substantially altered the film from his original vision during the film's post-production. He was apparently given a ton of freedom while filming the movie, but as soon as post-production began, Marvel stepped in and changed the film. Should also mention here that Alan Taylor is not the only person who worked on the film and dislikes it. Idris Elba has claimed that filming was tedious and exhausting. Christopher Eccleston described making the film as just a gun in your mouth. And Natalie Portman wanted to quit from the film when Patty Jenkins left the project, but didn't because she was afraid of getting sued for breaching her contract. So what do we know about Alan Taylor's original version of Dark World? Well, not much. We know for a fact that Loki was originally supposed to die for real, but test audiences refused to believe that he was dead, which convinced Marvel to change the ending. Also, the film was supposed to end with Thor and Jane breaking up, saying they weren't compatible. Lylla retcon. In Guardians of the Galaxy, you can briefly see Lylla's name pop up when the Nova Corps are looking at Rocket's known associates. And for nearly 10 years, this was just a little Easter egg. However, now with the release of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, this Easter egg is a little bit weird, as while Lylla was an associate of Rocket, she died before ever escaping High Evolutionary, and she gave herself the name Lylla. So how did the Nova Corps find out about her? This has led some people to claim that this Easter egg isn't canon anymore, and it's been retconned away. However, I don't actually think so. I think it's more likely that Rocket was interrogated by the Nova Corps at some point, and when asked about his associates, he just mentioned the name Lylla, knowing that the Nova Corps can't really do anything with that name. Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy's weird relationship. So the Guardians and Thor have a weird history. Most of the team seems to like him in Infinity War, and he and Rocket seem to be friends throughout Endgame, but in Love and Thunder, all of the Guardians hate him, and in Guardians 3, Thor is never mentioned, and his time with the Guardians isn't even touched on, minus a picture from Infinity War popping up at the credits. But even then, that was before he joined the Guardians. This is all despite him being a member of the Guardians for at least 2 years. And Rocket and Nebula both knew him for 6 years. So why is this? Why wasn't Thor ever mentioned in Guardians of the Galaxy 3? Well, it's probably because it's no secret that James Gunn isn't a huge fan of how the Russo brothers handled some of the Guardians. He's never outright said he hated how they're portrayed or anything, but judging from various tweets and interviews, like this one in particular, he wasn't really a fan of Thor being part of the Guardians. He's even said that he's happy that Love and Thunder exists because Thor left the team in that film. He's even said that if Love and Thunder didn't happen, he was just gonna open Guardians 3 up, and Thor wasn't gonna be there. He wouldn't be mentioned at all. Rising Tide. This was a viral marketing website created to promote the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's an in-universe website run by a hacker group known as Rising Tide, who are determined to reveal the truth about S.H.I.E.L.D. to the world. There were several videos created for the website, including first-hand footage of sketchy-looking S.H.I.E.L.D. agents doing some stuff. Eventually, the site would be shut down. However, all the videos created for the website have been archived. Spider-Man in She-Hulk. Early ideas for She-Hulk involved both Spider-Man and several characters related to Spider-Man showing up in the show. The show's head writer, Jessica Gao, really wanted to use these characters in the show, and there's a pretty good chance that she may have been able to, if not for, one small problem. Sony. Because of the weird joint custody thing with Spider-Man between Sony and Disney, the team working on She-Hulk were denied using Spider-Man or any characters relating to him. Shuri x Namor. So because people love shipping rivals, when Wakanda Forever came out, fans began to ship Namor and Shuri. Pretty weird ship in my opinion, because he kinda, straight up murders Shuri's mom, but whatever, I guess. Not only that, but fans claimed that there were scenes in the movie where you could actually see that the two were attracted to each other. Normally, this would just be fans shipping characters. There wouldn't be any truth to this. However, strangely enough, the fans that claimed there was something between the two were actually somewhat correct. It was revealed by one of the film's editors, Michael P. Shaver, shortly after the film's release, that in early stages of the film's development, there was talk about adding a romance plotline between the pair that would add some complexity to the relationship. Although, shortly after this, Wakanda Forever's production designer, Hannah Beachler, came out and said that the stuff that Shaver said was taken out of context by the media, and there was never a romance plotline in the story. So, was there ever a romance plotline between the two? I don't know, probably not. Jason Quill knew Peter was abducted. In 2014, James Gunn confirmed that the ending of Guardians of the Galaxy was changed fairly late in development. The original ending would cut back to Earth after the Guardians fly off. Peter's grandfather, Jason Quill, would be looking at a photograph of Peter and his mother. He then looks up to the stars, implying that Jason Quill saw Peter get abducted by Yondu, and now is awaiting his return. This scene was removed from the film for two reasons. The first is that James Gunn was worried that audiences wouldn't recognize Peter's grandfather's actor, Greg Henry, with makeup on, making him look older. Also because the scene was extremely sad, and would have been a gut punch to audiences. Love and Thunder's scrapped LGBT scenes. When Thor Love and Thunder was first announced, Tessa Thompson announced that part of the film would be about Valkyrie looking for her queen throughout the course of the film. In the months leading up to the film, it was heavily speculated and rumored that Valkyrie would end up in a relationship with either Lady Sif or Captain Marvel. More on the Captain Marvel thing in a bit. And finally, right before the film's release, Natalie Portman was asked how gay was Thor Love and Thunder, to which she responded with, "So gay," with Watiki adding, "super gay." So when the film came out, how gay was it? That's it. That was it. Yeah, it turns out that during the film's production, Watiki and Thompson both agreed to remove the Valkyrie finding a queen arc in favor of Valkyrie learning to love herself. 90s animated X-Men Professor X in MCU. Right after Multiverse of Madness came out, fans began speculating that the Professor X featured in the film was actually the Professor X from the 90s X-Men cartoon, with the evidence being that they played a little bit of the show's theme when he showed up, and he was riding around in his big yellow scooter. Fans then went on to predict that X-Men 97 would end with Charles traveling to Earth 838 and joining the Illuminati. However, this theory falls apart completely when you actually stop to think about it. In the 90s cartoon, Charles is American, not British, and the theme being played was just a little fan service. And finally, Michael Waldron came out and said that while Professor X in Multiverse of Madness does take inspiration from the animated series, he also takes influence from the Fox X-Men films, meaning that no, this isn't the animated series Professor X. Billy Maximoff's original actor. Originally, Billy Maximoff was going to be played by a child actor named Jackson Robert Scott. He actually filmed quite a few episodes. However, the filming of WandaVision was put on hiatus for a bit because of COVID-19. When production got back on track, Jackson Robert Scott couldn't make it to set due to scheduling issues. And so, they needed to recast Billy Maximoff. So yeah, there's a bunch of footage out there of WandaVision, but with a completely different Billy Maximoff. Lady Sif's scrapped plotline. When Lady Sif was announced to be returning in Thor Love and Thunder, people were pretty excited, as we hadn't seen her in any MCU material since 2015 in an episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So when the film came out, people were pretty upset that she ended up having like 50 seconds of screen time. It also didn't help that we finally got an extremely comic-accurate outfit for Sif, only to not really see it. But we were supposed to see a lot more of Lady Sif in the film. As revealed by concept artist Jeremy Love, concept art was created showing Sif exploring Elfheim, seeing some ruins, and traveling through some caves, before she'd be confronted by Gore. This entire sequence never ended up in the film, and it's not even known if these scenes were filmed. Not only that, but Sif was also supposed to appear in the scene where Thor, Jane, Valkyrie, and Korg discuss how to rescue the Asgardian children and go to God City. This version of the scene was filmed, but went unused for some reason. What was the point of bringing Sif back if they were just going to have her show up for like 50 seconds max? At least Jamie Alexander got to play the character some more on Loki and 2 episodes of What If. Original Ironheart Mark II. In December of 2022, concept artist Phil Solders released concept art he made for Wakanda Forever, showing what Ironheart's design could have been. And by could have, I mean what Ironheart's suit actually looks like. Yes, this really awesome design is apparently what her suit actually looks like. Turns out, what she's wearing during the final battle in the finished film are just combat upgrades that can be ejected off the suit. Basically, this suit is the undersuit, while the suit we actually see in the film is the oversuit. You see, originally, during the final battle in Wakanda Forever, Ironheart's suit was going to be damaged by Namora, so she would have to eject all of the combat upgrades, revealing the undersuit. This is the actual Ironheart Mark II, while the armor upgrades we see in the film are known as the Ironheart Mark 2.5. And before I get comments going, oh, this is all non-canon because it's all deleted stuff, you can actually see this suit in the finished film as a schematic. So there's a very good chance that this is still canon. Hulk in Civil War. Despite Captain America Civil War basically being Avengers 3, Hulk's not featured in the film in any capacity. But that wasn't the original plan. Early on in the film's production, Mark Ruffalo was going to return as Hulk in the film. He was scrapped because Marvel wanted to save him for Thor Ragnarok. As for Hulk's role in the story, we don't really know what it was going to be, though there are rumors stating that Hulk was meant to be the leader of the pro-Sokovia Accords side, instead of Iron Man. Around the time of Civil War, Marvel had actually considered cutting Iron Man out of most of the film, due to Robert Downey Jr. being a pretty expensive actor. So the idea was that Bruce Banner would lead the team instead of Tony Stark. Although this is all rumors and speculation. Honestly, this probably isn't even true, because while I remember seeing this rumor a ton back in 2016, 2017, I can't really find any articles or posts about it in 2023. Though there is one more role that Hulk could have had in the film. One far more likely. In Civil War, Black Panther eventually splits off on his own, and basically becomes a third party in the conflict. This role was always intended to be in the film, but it wasn't always supposed to be Black Panther who would become the third party. Several other characters were discussed, but none of them have been revealed to the public. So it's possible that this was supposed to be Hulk's role in the film. Kraglin was almost scrapped from Endgame. So if I were to ask you, which MCU films does Kraglin show up in? You'd probably say the 3 Guardians films and Love and Thunder. But you'd be wrong. There's one more movie he appears in. Avengers Endgame. Where is he? Right there. Yeah, it barely counts, but it wasn't supposed to be like that. Kraglin was actually part of the initial portal scene lineup where you'd see him on the ground, front and center alongside the Guardians of the Galaxy, Wasp, and Spider-Man. However, when the film came out, he was replaced by Groot in the shot, with him now being on the weird speeder bike thing in the background. And, Sean Gunn did not look happy about this. This change has led to various theories as to why he was almost scrapped from the film. Some speculate it was Marvel stabbing James Gunn in the back, because around that time James Gunn was fired from Guardians 3. So I guess pushing his brother into the background would make him mad. But I really don't buy that theory. It seems really petty. Some theorize that James Gunn himself asked them to remove Kraglin from the scene because he wanted to save Kraglin using Yondu's arrow correctly for Guardians 3. Interesting idea, but in the actual scene, we can see that Kraglin would have used a rifle during the fight, not the arrow. And finally, some just speculate that they just wanted to have Groot there instead, because he's a far more prominent member of the Guardians. This is the theory that I personally believe, though I don't know why they couldn't have had just, both of them there. Snapped off camera. At the end of Infinity War, a bunch of people got snapped, and were dead for 5 years. While we see characters like Bucky, Black Panther, Falcon, Spider-Man, Wanda, and Star-Lord all die, there were actually many other characters who were snapped, but we didn't get to see snapped. Though keep in mind, I'm only covering the characters who were already introduced before Infinity War, so any character who was introduced after the movie and was revealed to have gotten snapped, like Yelena for example, won't be in this list. Anyways, Ned Leeds, Michelle Jones, Flash Thompson, Betty Brant, and a good chunk of Peter Parker's classmates and teachers were all snapped. Betty Ross, Jane Foster, Thunderbolt Ross, Aunt May, Eric Selvig, Lady Sif, Shuri, the dude from Avengers 1 who was playing Galaga, and the dude who played Loki in that one play in Ragnarok. Original Blade script. So Blade was originally supposed to begin production in July of 2022. However, it was later pushed back to October of 2022. And only a few weeks before production was supposed to begin, the film's director stepped down from the project due to the film's changing production schedule. But not only that, reports began coming in about how Blade's actor, Mahershala Ali, was pretty frustrated with the film because apparently the script was pretty weak. Normally, people would be pretty skeptical about these claims, but combined with the fact that the director stepped down, it looked like these rumors were legit. Further evidence would come out in November of 2022, where it was revealed that the film not only got a new director, but also a completely different writer, Michael Starbury, and was basically rewriting the entire film. So yeah, it seems that these rumors were true. So what was the original Blade script? Was it really that bad? As of right now, we don't really know anything about it, outside of some leaks that are probably not true, since they come from 4chan. In case you're curious about these leaks, Apparently, the original script had the story take place in the present day with flashbacks to the 1970s. Characters like Rachel Van Helsing, Hannibal King, Quincy Harker, Deacon Frost, Saffron Calder, and a girl named Alex were going to play roles throughout the film. Blade was also going to spend a majority of the movie defending a teenage girl from vampires. When Blade finally gets released, I'm sure we'll get more information on its original script.
We'll be right back to Marvel's Avengers, Ultron Revolution on Disney XD.
For the first time ever, the world's largest army of superheroes is under your control. Don't blow it. Marvel Ultimate Alliance, rated teen.
And now back to Marvel's Avengers, Ultron Revolution on Disney XD.
Scrapped Deadpool cameos. So Deadpool is going to make his MCU debut in Deadpool 3, which is both an MCU film and a Fox X-Men film. Weird, but I guess we'll see how that works out. But Deadpool was actually supposed to debut in the MCU much earlier in 2 different projects. First off, he was supposed to appear in Shang-Chi, where he would show up in the fighting ring, although this might not actually be true. While there is concept art showing Deadpool in Shang-Chi, notice how he's fighting Proxima Midnight, and she's not just dead in the MCU, she's double dead. So it's very likely he was just drawn here as a placeholder. Meanwhile, in Multiverse of Madness, there were talks extremely early in the film's development about including a cameo from Deadpool. However, it was decided not to include him in the film, as this would kind of be a weird way of introducing him in the MCU. We know that these discussions never evolved into anything but discussions, because Ryan Reynolds has said multiple times that Marvel never contacted him about a role in Doctor Strange. Werewolf by Night color version. So before Werewolf by Night came out, various leaks came out about the special, claiming that a month or 2 after its release, Marvel would release a version of the special that was entirely in color. Now this never ended up happening, but those leaks did have an element of truth to them. The entirety of Werewolf by Night was shot in color. However, the film's director, Michael Giacchino, was able to convince Kevin Feige to allow the film to be in black and white. So while a color version of the film was never released, it's possible that a colored version does exist somewhere in Marvel's archives. Echo x Moon Knight. Originally, Echo was set to appear in Moon Knight and be his main love interest. However, this wasn't an idea that anyone in the show's writing staff liked. Turns out, this was an idea created by Marvel executives. So why did they want her in Moon Knight so bad? According to Jeremy Slater, it's because they liked the character and they just wanted to throw her in any project, regardless if it made sense. During the show's production, the executives walked back on this and decided not to have her in the show, as they thought it would make way more sense for her to show up in Hawkeye, much to the relief of everyone writing Moon Knight. Scrapped What If episodes. So there's a lot of scrapped What If episodes. Though keep in mind, there is a chance that these scrapped episodes could be reworked into future episodes. Anyways, here's all the ones we know of. One episode would have been a tribute to the story of the Odyssey. This episode would have starred Tony Stark traveling the galaxy. An episode about what if Howard Stark was in Tony's life was scrapped. Basically, he would have set Tony up on another path in life. This was scrapped because there was already an episode about Iron Man in the season. The same episode that was cut from Season 1 and is now going to be in Season 2. There was an episode scrapped about Spider-Man turning into an actual spider monster. There was also an episode about what if the Avengers were dinosaurs, but it was rejected for being too silly. There was also an episode about what if Jane Foster became Thor. This was scrapped because, well, Thor Love and Thunder was happening. There was also an episode about what if Loki became worthy to wield Thor's hammer. This episode was scrapped because Loki was already getting his own show where he was the hero. There was also an episode starring the Guardians of the Galaxy. Outside of that, there's not much we know about it. Although, the reason why it was scrapped was because A.C. Bradley was told that her script for the episode was basically just half of Guardians of the Galaxy 3's plot. There was also an episode about Captain America becoming president. While this episode was scrapped, there is an Easter egg that remains in the show referencing it. And finally, we know of 2 episodes that were cut thanks to the assembled episode about What If. These being, What If Maria saved Carol Danvers, and What If the Avengers were formed in 1988. The original Wakanda Forever. On August 28, 2020, Chadwick Boseman would pass away, and because of his passing, Wakanda Forever's plot had to be changed completely. While most of the film's original plot is a mystery, we do know some things about it. For example, T'Challa would be extremely upset at being dead for 5 years during the snap. He would also meet his son and Nakia's husband. In this original draft, after T'Challa died, Nakia would move on and marry a man in Haiti. Also, Namor was still going to be the film's villain, and Shuri was always going to become the Black Panther in the film, as Marvel had plans on both T'Challa and Shuri sharing the mantle. Oh, and one final thing. Apparently Chadwick Boseman really liked voicing T'Challa Star-Lord in What If, so he apparently asked both Kevin Feige and Ryan Coogler to incorporate some of Star-Lord T'Challa's personality into the main MCU T'Challa in Wakanda Forever. Becky Lynch's double scrapped appearances. Poor Becky Lynch. For those that don't know, Becky Lynch is a WWE wrestler and was supposed to appear in 2 different MCU movies. And in each of these appearances, she would play a different character. But for some reason, both of her appearances were cut from the films. First off, she was originally supposed to appear in the post-credits scene to Eternals. In this scene, she would play... well, we don't know. We know that the scene was filmed, but we don't know her role. Most people seem to think that she was originally supposed to show up with Star Fox and that disgusting creature at the end of the movie, but that's all speculation. Then a year later, she was supposed to be in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. However, this time we actually know who she was going to play. Well, kinda. We don't know her name, but in a leaked set photo, she's hanging out with a bunch of the Navy SEALs who were killed by Namor and his soldiers towards the beginning of the movie. And she's also wearing one of the Navy SEALs' uniforms. So it's highly likely she was meant to be a member of the SEAL team. Captain America and the White Wolf. Originally, the final episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier would begin with the title card being changed from Falcon and the Winter Soldier to Captain America and the White Wolf, as a way of showing that Sam and Bucky have both grown throughout the show into their new roles. But then everyone kind of realized that the White Wolf part was kind of dumb. I mean, seriously, has anyone ever called Bucky that in the entire MCU? Oh yeah, there was the post-credit scene in Black Panther, never mind. But yeah, they dropped the White Wolf part. Scrapped Eternals cameos. So the final scene in Eternals went through some pretty major changes. The original ending of the movie had the entire team be mind-wiped and sent off to do another cycle, but that was deemed too sad and dark. So then it was changed to show some of the Eternals being recruited into the Avengers, but they scrapped that idea too. So then they were like, let's have Kang show up, with Jonathan Majors reprising his role. But that was scrapped too. So they finally decided on doing the ending that we actually got, with a few of the Eternals being captured. But there was one more change they made to the ending. Originally, Blade wasn't supposed to be the dude who confronts Black Knight in the after credits scene. It was supposed to be Sam Wilson. This was probably scrapped when the Avengers recruitment ending was cut. Gamora was going to die much earlier. Originally, Gamora was meant to die in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 instead of Yondu. She was originally going to sacrifice herself to save Star-Lord. James Gunn has said, quote, "I knew from the beginning that Zoe only wanted to play the character for so many years, and she's been very honest saying that she's done. And so, I was going to have her die. She was only spared when Kevin Feige talked James Gunn out of it. Made him realize that Gamora's death here just didn't feel right, and that there was more story to tell with her, and so, Yondu died in her place." Abomination and Ghost's DNA in the Harvest. So in Secret Invasion, we're introduced to the Harvest, a collection of DNA from various people who were present during the Battle of Earth. This was most likely created as a last resort in case the Avengers were to die in the future or something, so like Nick Fury could have somebody like gain all their powers. It's got DNA from Gamora, Captain Marvel, Hulk, Thanos, Thor, Korg, Captain America, Black Panther, Mantis, Drax, Ebony Maw, etc. But what's weird about it is that it also has Abomination and Ghost's DNA. This is notable because neither of them took part in that battle, and neither of them are even in Avengers Endgame. So why is their DNA in there? Well, I got a theory. Abomination was in jail around the time of Endgame, and Ghost is probably in jail? I don't know, we'll get an answer in Thunderbolts. So maybe Fury had Gravik and the other Skrulls collect DNA from them while they're locked up. This is the only theory that makes sense to me, as we know the Skrull Resistance didn't have their DNA before the Harvest. As before Gravik got the Harvest, all they had was a Frost Beast, an Extremist Soldier, Cull Obsidian, and Groot. This whole thing's just kind of weird because there's such a big emphasis placed in Secret Invasion about the Harvest being made from people who were at the Battle of Earth, and these two were just like they weren't. Krylar's scrapped plotline. Krylar was going to have a much bigger role in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Originally, he'd end up on board the yacht stolen by Janet, Hank, and Hope. Eventually, Kang would capture him alongside Janet and Cassie and throw him in prison. And later in the film, Jentorra would have rescued him from the prison, and he'd try extremely hard to convince her that he was still a good guy deep down. But Jentorra would realize that he was bluffing and leave him behind. Anyways, this was all filmed, but was scrapped, because originally, Quantumania was 3 hours long, and Marvel didn't really want the film to be that long. So people working on the film began cutting scenes and subplots, with Krylar getting pretty much every one of his scenes cut. She-Hulk, Episode 10. When She-Hulk was announced, the show was confirmed to have 10 episodes. However, when the show finished airing, it only had 9 episodes. This extra episode was scrapped due to the show not really needing it, and if it did happen, it would be a filler episode, or it would require the writers to stretch the storyline over 2 episodes. So basically the show's story would suffer if they had that extra episode. I really wish they did this for other shows as well. Remove or add an episode to the episode count in order to fit the story. Like Falcon and the Winter Soldier. During development, that show had 8 episodes, but I guess that was too much, so they squashed the finale and rushed US Agent's redemption arc. Also ruined the Flag Smashers. I liked that show for the first 5 episodes, but man, that finale was just one of the worst they've done, in my opinion. Moon Knight and Blade in Werewolf by Night. Before Werewolf by Night came out, there were rumors and supposed leaks stating that Blade would make his on-screen debut in the special. But not only that, Moon Knight would return, and both heroes would be part of the monster hunt. When the special came out, it turned out that these leaks and rumors were fake. Although, by coincidence, discussions about Blade appearing in Werewolf by Night did happen early in the special's production. According to the director, the writing team thought it'd be a cool idea to have Blade appear in the special. However, as they began working on the story, they quickly realized that Blade wasn't needed in the story. So Blade was scrapped from the show, and Moon Knight was never discussed as far as we know. Iron Fist movie. In August 2010, It was announced that Rich Wilkes was hired to write an Iron Fist film set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, no film would ever come out of this, but instead, this cancelled film would lead to the creation of the Iron Fist Netflix series in 2017. So what would have the Iron Fist film looked like? Well, we don't know. No, really, we don't know anything. In the 13 years since its announcement, no information about the film has ever come out. Its story, the characters, how it would tie in with other MCU projects, etc. Nothing is known about this project. Crystal in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Originally, in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5, Crystal from the Inhumans TV series was going to make an appearance. However, Crystal would never end up being in the show. Why? Well, because Inhumans came out, and to this day, it is the single worst received MCU film or show ever released. So Marvel scrapped her appearance and tried to pretend that show didn't happen. Until Multiverse of Madness, I guess. Scrapped Loki one-shot. So in the first MCU Iceberg, I briefly mentioned that one of the many scrapped one-shots included one focused on Loki. However, we didn't know anything about that one-shot at the time, but since that video, we now know more about it. This one-shot would have been about Loki traveling to Earth in the 1970s to do some wacky stuff, like partying at Studio 54 and riding a horse. The one-shot would never be made, and would just be an idea floating around the studio, although at least one piece of concept art was created for it. This cancelled one-shot, however, would go on to inspire the D.B. Cooper scene in Loki Season 1, as that scene directly confirmed that Loki was on Earth for a bit in the 1970s. She-Hulk was originally more muscular. Originally, She-Hulk was going to be a lot more muscular in the MCU. Not like this, but more like this. This was revealed on Twitter by a VFX artist who worked on the show. They revealed this after fans of She-Hulk began complaining that she was a bit scrawny looking on the show. It turns out the reason why VFX artists removed most of her muscles is because of executives who repeatedly requested them to remove them. Hopefully this outcry convinces Marvel to make her more muscular in her next appearance. Luke Cage movie. A film based on Luke Cage had been in development hell for a decade over at Sony and Columbia Pictures, from 2003 all the way to 2013. This film was being directed by John Singleton and written by Ben Ramsey. Jamie Foxx, Dwayne Johnson, Idris Elba, and Tyrese Gibson were all either considered to play Luke Cage or expressed interest in playing the character. Development of the film came to an end in 2013 when Luke Cage was given back to Marvel Studios. It's unknown how much, or if any of the work done on this film eventually led to the 2016 Netflix series, but there's probably a good chance that at least something from this cancelled film was carried over into the show. I mean, the film was in development hell for a straight decade. I can't imagine they'd let the ideas created for that project go to waste. Loki's scrapped cameos. Originally, there were plans to have various cameos in the first episode of Loki as he first arrives at the TVA. There was also supposed to be a lot more people in the TVA, but all of these things were scrapped due to COVID-19 restrictions, as only so many people could be on set at a time. The only cameo we know about was going to be a variant of Rocket Raccoon, Wong's girlfriend. In Multiverse of Madness, there were plans for Wong to have a girlfriend, and this girlfriend is actually in the movie, although it's not really shown that they're in a relationship. This girlfriend was Sarah Wolf, the woman that stabs the Darkhold only for Wanda to kill. Because every scene showing the pair in a relationship was cut, it's very likely the relationship itself was cut too, so the two weren't ever together in the MCU. However, Wong might have a girlfriend now. When Madison showed up in She-Hulk, she was very quickly shipped with Wong, and in universe, the two became pretty good friends. So it's entirely possible that because of the reception to the pair, Marvel may make the two a couple in the future. Personally, I'm not super into this. I think they work better as friends, but we'll see what happens. Daredevil vs. Galactus and Silver Surfer. In 2012, Marvel Studios attempted to get the rights back to Galactus and Silver Surfer. However, 20th Century Fox refused to let them. Most likely because they were planning on rebooting the Fantastic Four films, which resulted in Fanforstic. But what did Marvel offer them? Because they obviously didn't just ask for the rights back without offering anything in return. Well, the offer was that Fox would get to keep the Daredevil rights for much longer. But like I said, Fox refused. But just imagine, if this deal went through, we never would have gotten the Netflix Daredevil series. And so Daredevil wouldn't appear in No Way Home, She-Hulk, or Born Again. But at the same time, Galactus and Silver Surfer would have appeared in Guardians of the Galaxy and other cosmic Marvel projects. Honestly, I'm glad this deal didn't go through. It's not worth it. MODOK in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Throughout Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s life, the creative team on the show really wanted to introduce MODOK into the MCU. However, Marvel Studios kept rejecting the requests to use MODOK, because they wanted to use the character. For example, there was talk about MODOK being the villain of Captain America the Winter Soldier, with Peter Dinklage playing the character, but this didn't end up happening. He was also supposed to show up as a cameo in Captain Marvel, but again, never happened. And so, MODOK never appeared in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Except, he kinda did. Enter Antov Ivanov. This dude was a villain featured in both the 4th and 5th seasons of the show, and at first glance is nothing like MODOK. He's a human supremacist Russian spy who ends up battling the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a bit. However, after being defeated by Quake, his head was removed and placed into a jar that allowed him to remotely control various robotic clones of himself. Now, technically, Anton is actually an adaptation of the character Anton from the comics. He was one of the many people to take up the mantle of the Red Guardian, and was secretly a life model decoy who would eventually be decapitated and have his head live on. However, because the team behind the show really wanted to use MODOK, they snuck in some references to the character. For example, in the episode The Return, Anton directly refers to himself as designed only for killing, which is, of course, part of MODOK's name, mechanized organism designed only for killing. So Anton Ivanov is both an adaptation of Anton Red Guardian and MODOK. Secret QR codes. In several Disney Plus MCU shows, there's secret QR codes that if you scan it with your phone, they'll give you a free comic. So far, they've appeared in Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, and She-Hulk. Here's all of them. Moon Knight Episode 1 gives you Werewolf by Night issue 32, released in May of 1975. Episode 2 gives you Werewolf by Night issue 33, released in June 1975. Episode 5 gives you Moon Knight issue 1, released in August of 1980, and Episode 6 gives you Moon Knight Annual, released in September of 2019. Ms. Marvel Episode 1 gives you Ms. Marvel issue 1, released in February of 2014. Episode 2 gives you Ms. Marvel issue 15, released in May of 2015. Episode 3 gives you Magnificent Ms. Marvel issue 1, released in March 2019. And Episode 4 gives you Ms. Marvel issue 12, released in October 2016. Episode 1 of She-Hulk gives you Savage She-Hulk issue 1, released in February of 1980. Episode 2 gives you She-Hulk issue 1, released in March 2004. Episode 3 gives you Savage She-Hulk issue 2, released in March 1980. Episode 4 gives you the West Coast Avengers Annual issue 4, released in January of 1989. Episode 5 gives you She-Hulk issue 10, released in December of 2004. Episode 6 gives you the West Coast Avengers issue 46, released in July of 1989. Episode 7 gives you Tales to Astonish issue 48, released in October of 1963. Episode 8 gives you She-Hulk issue 9, released in October of 2014. And finally, Episode 9 gives you Sensational She-Hulk issue 50, released in April of 1993.
We'll be right back to Marvel's Avengers, Ultron Revolution on Disney XD.
It's the powers of Thor. Find a winning Dr. Pepper can and you could win super speed, strength, or flight. Details at drpepper.com, rated PG-13.
And now back to Marvel's Avengers Ultron Revolution on Disney XD.
Falcon in Far From Home. Very early on in Far From Home's development, there were plans to introduce Sam Wilson as the new Captain America in the film. The idea was that during one of the battles against the Elementals, side note, did you know there's technically 2 Sandmans in the MCU? Anyways, during one of these fights, Spider-Man would call on the Avengers for backup, and Sam Wilson, Captain America, would fly in and help him. This was removed for 2 reasons. The first was that if Spider-Man called in the Avengers for backup, it would ruin his character arc in the movie. Also, Marvel felt that this would be a pretty poor introduction to Sam being Captain America. Planet X film. In October of 2022, Vin Diesel made a post on Instagram claiming that Marvel wants to make a movie about Planet X. For those that don't know, that's Groot's home planet. So it would be an entire film of just, I am Groot. Now it's possible Vin Diesel was just mistaken, and Marvel doesn't want to make a movie about Planet X, but instead a one-shot or a special presentation. I personally think that's the case, because I can't imagine Marvel wanting to make an entire movie about Planet X. Orson Randall in Iron Fist. So despite Iron Fist only getting 2 seasons, there were actually plans for a 3rd one. According to Finn Jones, Iron Fist's actor, Season 3 was going to be heavily inspired by the immortal Iron Fist, by Ed Brubaker and Matt Fraction, and that one of the big storylines of Season 3 was going to be the introduction of Orson Randall, someone else who has the power of Iron Fist. Also, he has guns. Other plans for the 3rd season involved Danny and Ward being in a country far away from the United States, fighting bad guys, while Colleen would be in New York City, taking over the mantle of Iron Fist. Scrapped Ant-Man cameos. Hawkeye's showrunner, Rhys Thomas, tried to convince Paul Rudd to film a cameo in Hawkeye due to how much he enjoyed he and Jeremy Renner's chemistry on press runs for Endgame. However, Paul Rudd refused. Also, Shang-Chi's producers discussed having Scott Lang make a brief cameo in the film due to both Shang-Chi and Scott living in San Francisco. But they dropped the idea pretty early on in development, because they felt it would derail from the story. Nadia Van Dyne can't be asexual because of the MCU. So in Marvel Comics, there's a character named Nadia Van Dyne, who is one of the many people to fight crime under the alias Wasp. Sadly for Nadia, she's in a really bad spot, because while she's written to be asexual, Marvel refuses to let anyone confirm that she's asexual in the comics. Why is this? It's because Nadia is partially inspired by the character Hope Van Dyne in the MCU. Despite her being a completely different character from Hope, she was created to capitalize on Wasp being in the MCU, so she is somewhat tied to Hope. And because of this, Marvel refuses to let her be confirmed as asexual, because Hope in the MCU is at the very least straight. But that hasn't stopped writers and artists from at least hinting that she's asexual, as Nadia was featured in a panel in Marvel's Voice, Pride, and there's even an issue of Marvel Action Chillers that suggests that she's aromantic. The Miss Marvel film trilogy. What if I were to tell you that there's an entire Miss Marvel film trilogy out right now? You'd probably call me a liar, but I'm not. In 2022, Disney took the 6 episodes of Miss Marvel and divided the episodes into pairs. They then sliced these pairs together, creating 3 feature-length long episodes of the show. They then released these 3 super episodes as films, but only in Pakistan, because at the time of Miss Marvel's release, Disney Plus was not available in Pakistan. So in order to let people in Pakistan experience the show, they released these 3 films bi-weekly in theaters through their Pakistani distributor, HKC Entertainment. These films aired on June 16th, June 30th, and July 14th, 2022. Now you may be wondering 2 things. Do these film versions of the show have deleted scenes put back into the product? From what I was able to research, no. And can you watch these movies? And again, from what I can tell from research, no. Disney refuses to release any of their Disney Plus shows on DVD or Blu-ray, so unless they add the film versions of the show onto Disney Plus, these 3 Ms. Marvel movies are going to become lost media. Danielle Souza was in the Avengers. During the development of the final season of Agents of S.A.B.E.R, the show's writers wanted to do a really weird retcon. So Danielle Souza is from Agent Carter, a show set in the 1940s. And he made his return to the MCU in the final season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because of time travel shenanigans. Now, Danielle Souza's actor, Enver Jokov, actually played a background character in the first Avengers film, as a police officer during the Battle of New York. So the writers of the show thought it'd be a fun idea to somehow retcon that cop into being Souza via time travel. However, they couldn't figure out a way to actually make this work, so it was scrapped. Also, that cop already has a name. It's Officer Saunders. Incredible Hulk 2 plans. So like with Scott Derrickson's Doctor Strange 2, I briefly talked about Incredible Hulk 2 in the last MCU Iceberg. However, we pretty much knew nothing about it at the time. But very recently, we got some information about this cancelled film from the director of the original film. The Incredible Hulk 2 would have introduced various new Hulks into the MCU, like Grey Hulk and Red Hulks. Yeah, Red Hulks. So Red Hulk, and most likely, Red She-Hulk. A lot of Red Hulks. The leader would have also returned to the film. And as of right now, this is all we know about the Incredible Hulk 2. Bertrand Crawley. While never mentioned in the actual show, the street performer that pretends to be a statue in the first 2 episodes of Moon Knight is actually Bertrand Crawley, an ally of Moon Knight from the comics, who often serves as his informant. So if it's never mentioned in the actual show, then how do we know this dude is supposed to be an adaptation of Bertrand? Well, it's because Jeremy Slater directly confirmed it on Twitter. Captain Marvel x Valkyrie. So earlier in the video, I mentioned that fans began speculating that Valkyrie and Captain Marvel were going to be in a relationship in either Love and Thunder or in the Marvels. Now at first glance, this seems kind of like a weird theory. Sure, Valkyrie's bisexual, but there's no indication of what Carol Danvers' sexuality is. Also, the two have not really interacted at all. So where did fans get this idea from? Well, funny enough, Tessa Thompson and Brie Larson. At Ace Comic-Con in Chicago in 2019, both Brie Larson and Tessa Thompson stated that they ship Captain Marvel and Valkyrie. And then, 3 years later in an interview, Tessa Thompson stated that she hopes Valkyrie's relationship status changes sooner than later, and that she loves spending time with Brie Larson. She said, quote, "But there are a lot of amazing men, women, otherworldly creatures inside of the MCU, and certainly in the canon of characters that could enter the MCU. So, I think there's so many fish in the sea. She's single, she's ready to mingle, and I love, both in the comics, Carol and Brie Larson, is a good friend of mine, and I love spending time with her. So I wouldn't be mad at it, for sure." So while it seems like a random shipping, the two actresses seem pretty into the idea. And with rumors that Valkyrie is going to show up in the Marvels, maybe, just maybe, they'll be an actual thing. Zolam and Cyclop. So Zolam, aka the default power armor in Fallout 4, is a bit of a weird character, because he's not an original character created for Quantumania. He's actually an adaptation of a comic character that Marvel legally can't use. At least in the films, they can still publish the comics. That character is Cyclop, and he couldn't be called that in the film because Cyclop is part of the Micronauts, which is owned by Hasbro, and they refuse to play ball about Marvel ever getting the film rights to the Micronauts. In fact, Zolam isn't even the only Micronauts character, as Quaz is based on the character Arcturus Ran. Eternals TV show. So Eternals didn't start out as a movie. In a reverse of Inhumans, Eternals was originally pitched as a TV show. However, during early development on the show, Marvel felt the show was very disconnected and decided to cancel it and then rework it into a film. Man-Thing's Weird History. So in Werewolf by Night, we were introduced to Man-Thing. Although, despite this being his first appearance in the MCU, because of name drops and Easter eggs, we know that Man-Thing has had a really wild history before showing up in Werewolf by Night. For starters, in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. episode, Nothing Personal, Man-Thing is directly referenced by name as being one of the many entities imprisoned inside S.H.I.E.L.D.'s prison, the Fridge. And he was freed from the prison in 2014. Then somehow, Man-Thing traveled into space and landed on S.A.B.E.R, where he became one of the planet's best gladiators. He was so good that the Grandmaster had a sculpture made of him on his palace. Then, somehow by 2017, Man-Thing returned to Earth and befriended Jack Russell. So yeah, thanks to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Thor Ragnarok, we know that Man-Thing was both a prisoner of S.H.I.E.L.D. and a gladiator on S.A.B.E.R. Also, Man-Thing's ex-wife from the comics, Ellen Brand, shows up in Iron Man 3 as part of AIM. While they have yet to confirm her relation to Man-Thing in the MCU, she does have a scar on her face, which is a reference to how in the comics, Man-Thing burns her face. Sinister Strange ending. As revealed through Multiverse of Madness's audio commentary, there was an alternate ending to Doctor Strange 2 that would have been pretty dark. According to Michael Waldron, after defeating Wanda, Strange would be left trapped in the Incursion universe. Meanwhile, Sinister Strange is revealed to be alive, and is now pretending to be Strange in the main MCU timeline. He would then turn towards the camera, and his third eye would open up. The scene would then cut to black, and Vincent Price's laugh from the song Thriller would play. This ending was created to both serve as a tribute to Sam Raimi's role in the Evil Dead franchise, and to show that dreamwalking has some pretty significant consequences. It was probably cut because that would be a pretty downer of an ending. Only 74 civilians died during the Battle of New York. Thanks to Captain America Civil War, we know the death toll for civilians in the Battle of New York was only 74 people. How? I get that some of the Chitauri were taking prisoners, but with all of the explosions and ships flying around, not even 100 people died? I mean, a bunch of cops and soldiers died, but only 74 civilians. I don't know, man. I know it's probably weird to be it should be more, but it really should, right? The way the film portrays the battle and how the rest of the MCU treats this event, you would think that 500 people died. But I guess not. I don't know, maybe I'm the weird one for thinking that this is weird. Talos in Age of Ultron. So Nick Fury, for most of Far From Home, wasn't actually Nick Fury, but instead Talos disguising himself as Fury. This has led to many different theories about which films do we actually see Nick Fury in. So Nick Fury is in 14 different projects, not counting What If because those are different Furies. Is it possible that Fury was a Skrull in all of these films and shows? Minus Captain Marvel, of course. Well, I don't know about all of them, but there is a case to be made in Age of Ultron. You see, in Captain Marvel, Fury explains that if his toast is cut diagonally, he can't eat it. But in Age of Ultron, he's seen eating toast that's been cut diagonally. I know it's a sandwich, but it's toasted bread, so it's toast. Many have claimed this has to mean that Fury was replaced in Age of Ultron. Although people keep saying that it's been confirmed that Talos only started disguising himself as Fury after Endgame, but I'm not sure who said that. Some people say John Watts, but I wasn't able to find anything about that. Regardless, I really like this theory. Rejected Captain America Mad Bomb film. As revealed by Anthony Russo, if Marvel weren't able to get Robert Downey Jr. back at all for Captain America Civil War, the plan was for the film to be an adaptation of the Mad Bomb story arc from 1976. The idea was that in the third act of the film, the Mad Bomb would go off and turn thousands of people into hordes of berserking zombie-like beings. They're not undead zombies, they're just mindless like a zombie and attack pretty much everything that moves. Joe Russo went on to say, quote, "The notion of the Mad Bomb would have been Cap having to fight civilians and how he would handle that. We were always trying to put him in these interesting moral conundrums because of his nature. That would have made a compelling third act, because if civilians are the antagonists, how could he stop them without killing them?" However, the Mad Bomb zombie-esque Captain America movie was never meant to be. Because you see, Kevin Feige was very adamant that Captain America 3 was going to be Civil War regardless if they were able to get Robert Downey Jr. back. So yeah, this Mad Bomb zombie-esque Captain America film was flat out rejected. Proxima Midnight married her brother. So maybe I'm just an idiot, but I didn't know that Thanos adopted all of the Black Order. Like, all of the Black Order are siblings. And so they're siblings also with Gamora and Nebula. Apparently it was mentioned in Infinity War or Guardians of the Galaxy, but I can't remember that being said. But regardless, they're one big adopted family. Not a good family, or a happy family, but a family, technically. Now this is where things get weird, because it was revealed in an interview that Proxima Midnight is married to Corvus Glaive, who is also part of the Black Order. You see where I'm going with this? They're not related, but they're adopted siblings and were raised together, so it's technically not that I word that I can't say on YouTube, but it's still pretty damn weird. I never thought Marvel would ever tackle this subject. Although Loki does have self-cest, so never mind. Moon Knight and Shang-Chi were supposed to debut much earlier. Originally, Iron Fist was going to mark the debut of two characters who went on to star in Phase 4 of the MCU, this being Shang-Chi and Moon Knight. During early development of Iron Fist, it was discussed having Shang-Chi in the show as a rival character to Iron Fist. However, these discussions went nowhere. As for Moon Knight, he was briefly considered by the show's creative team to show up in the show's second season. However, they felt the season was pretty busy, and the introduction of a character like Moon Knight would just make the season even more busy. So he was scrapped. Cancelled Adventures into Fear shows. So earlier in the video, I mentioned the cancelled Hulu MCU sub-series Adventures into Fear, which would have had a Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider show and Hellstrom. But there were supposed to be other shows in this little sub-series. As of right now, we only know of 3 other shows. However, sadly these shows never had their titles revealed, as they were all extremely early in development when they were cancelled. Luckily, we do have an idea of what 2 of these shows were gonna be. Like with Netflix's Defender shows, Hulu was planning a Defenders-style team-up show that would have Lilith, the mother of all demons, be the main antagonist. And that's all we know about that show. The other show we know at least a little bit about was going to be about the character Glyph, a member of the Howling Commandos with the powers of several Egyptian spirits. Though admittedly, this is just speculation. It was never confirmed a show about Glyph was being worked on. However, around the same time as the creation of Adventures into Fear, Marvel trademarked the show title Glyph. So it's very likely this was one of the cancelled shows. They also trademarked the name Spirits of Vengeance, which might have been the name of the Ghost Rider show. But at the same time, while promoting Adventures into Fear, Marvel referred to both the Ghost Rider show and Hellstrom as the cornerstones of the Spirits of Vengeance. So I think that was just the working title for Adventures into Fear, instead of the name of the Ghost Rider show. Del Toro's Doctor Strange. In 2007, acclaimed director Guillermo del Toro approached Marvel with an idea for a Doctor Strange film. The film would have been directed by del Toro, while Neil Gaiman would write it. However, Marvel wasn't interested in making a Doctor Strange film at the time. They did want to make one eventually, but he was very low on the list of characters they wanted to introduce into their upcoming cinematic universe. Weird to think that if Marvel went with this idea, a Doctor Strange film directed by Del Toro and written by Neil Gaiman would have been in Phase 1 of the MCU. As for the plot of the film, we have no idea. Neither Gaiman or Del Toro have revealed anything. Original Black Widow film. In 2017, Jessica Gao pitched a Black Widow film to Marvel, and this Black Widow film would be extremely different from the one we'd end up getting in 2021. Like, insanely different. Her pitch involved Natasha going to her high school reunion, but it's a little awkward because 20 years prior, when she was in high school, she was ordered to assassinate one of her classmates' dad. And so, at this reunion, she would have to deal with the fallout of this assassination, and her high school friends finding out that she was lying about her identity all this time. The only other aspect about this film that we know of is that She-Hulk would have played a role in the film. A pretty big role. So big, in fact, that executives asked Jessica Gao if she was actually pitching a She-Hulk film that featured Black Widow. Anyways, the pitch was rejected, but Jessica Gao would be brought on to make She-Hulk years later. Daughters of Liberty. So very recently, it's been leaked, or rumored, or whatever, that Marvel is in the process of making a film or show based on the superhero group, the Daughters of Liberty, a relatively new superhero group that first debuted in 2019. The group involves characters like Agatha Harkness, Invisible Woman, Sharon Carter, White Tiger, Misty Knight, Spider-Woman, Echo, and Mockingbird. Apparently, this project was beginning development just as the writer's strike began. Now, there's a million different MCU projects that are apparently happening, like a Nomad series, a Wiccan movie, a Midnight Suns movie, a Mephisto special, a Man-Thing special, a Silver Surfer special, a Nova series, a second season of Moon Knight, a World War Hulk film, a second season of Ms. Marvel, a Strange Academy series, etc., etc., etc. I could have had entries for all of these, but I didn't want to fill the iceberg up with potential future shows and movies. So I don't know. I don't think half of these are going to happen, including Daughters of Liberty. I think if they do an all-female team movie or show, they'll probably adapt A-Force instead, so they can have Captain Marvel and She-Hulk on the team. Marvel Studios spoilers get shut down for Ant-Man 3 leaks. In March 2023, the Marvel subreddit Marvel Studios Spoilers was shut down due to one of the many leaks posted there. What was this leak? The entire Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania script. The script was leaked in January of 2023, and Marvel and Disney were so angered by this leak that they issued a DMCA subpoena demanding to know who leaked the script, and anyone who posted leaks from January 15th to February 15th, 2023. They also wanted to know the names of every single one of the mod team members. The subreddit would return a few months later, though several mods left. As of right now, it's unknown what happened regarding the legal issues, and if anyone was punished for posting the leak. And that's it, everyone, ladies, gentlemen, and MBs. That is the MCU Iceberg Part 2, or Phase 2. Might call it Phase 2, because apparently if you call a video Part 2, it doesn't do very well in the algorithm or something. I don't know, that could be completely wrong. But yeah, this was a fun time to do. I know that the MCU is like the big thing to hate nowadays, like, oh, Phase 4 was crap and blah blah blah, but like, I don't know, I still really like the MCU. Honestly, I don't even get the whole like Phase 4 was bad arguments. Like, obviously, it's your opinion, but my opinion is that outside of Eternals and What If, Phase 4 was pretty good. She-Hulk was great. Ms. Marvel was really good, except for Episode 4 and kind of 5. I wasn't really big on those episodes. But Shang-Chi was great. No Way Home's great. I absolutely loved Moon Knight. Moon Knight was great. Loki Season 1 blew me away. That was a great show. Black Widow was alright. I've grown to appreciate it more over time, but like it's just kind of alright. Hawkeye was a lot of fun. Obviously, the Guardians Holiday Special was fun. Werewolf by Night was really, really good. Thor: Love and Thunder, it's whatever. I liked it a lot more. Like I liked it a lot, not a lot, but I did like it when I first saw it. But as I've rewatched it like 2 times since, like yeah, I do agree it's not very good, but I don't think it's like really bad. Like I'd rather watch Love and Thunder over the first 2 Thors any day of the week. And then as for Phase 5, like, I mean, Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania, I will fight for that film. Well, not, I shouldn't say that. I think it's all right. I think it's an all right film. I think it's fine. I think it's all right. It's good, right? I don't think it's great. I don't think it's amazing, but I think it's good. I think it's easily the most overhated MCU project. Like, yeah, the CGI is not very good for the most part, but Kang's fantastic. Jonathan Majors, probably a really bad dude in real life, but he's a fantastic actor in the film. He plays Kang really well. MODOK's a lot of fun. I know people don't like him because he's not comic accurate, but I mean, it's the MCU. Are you expecting comic accuracy at this point? But yeah, I thought the film was fun. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is my favorite MCU film, period. It's a masterpiece. I absolutely love that movie. Actually made me tear up at the end. And the whole, like, Dog Days dance, like, sequence at the end. Just such a happy end. It's such a good movie. Then Secret Invasion was... I really liked the first 3 episodes. 4 was whatever. 5 was solid. But then 6, the final episode, was just not good. It was really bad. It was one of the few times watching a Disney Plus Marvel show where I've been like, ooh, that's really, like, I was like actively frowning the entire way through. It was not good, in my opinion. Also, just like, Phase 4 introduced some really great characters. Like, I love Moon Knight. Miss Marvel's great. Kamala Khan's like one of my favorite MCU characters now. Kamala Khan's actress is fantastic. I'm really happy that she's in the MCU. She's a ton of fun. Shang-Chi is great. Great. I mean, pretty good movie, and also the character's great. Yeah, I think the MCU is looking pretty bright. I'm looking forward to a lot of the stuff. Next Iceberg will not be superhero related, and it will be a video game Iceberg, which should be fun. I don't expect that one to be very long, though. It won't be like a short Iceberg, but it won't be like it won't be like the Iron Man or the Flash Icebergs, where they're like 2.5 to 3.5 hours, right? So, then the next superhero Iceberg should be in November. And it will be like the Iron Man, like Flash, Spider-Man, like it's like those kinds of icebergs. So yeah, with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Post comments below what your favorite MCU projects from Phase 4 and 5. You know, you excited for the Marvels, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.
Where's my ham? I put it right here.